You are watching QTV. This is time now for the news. The headlines: President Edgar Lungu has called on the church to pray for continued peace and unity in the country. About 15 out of the marketeers who lost merchandise in the fire that swept through Lusaka City Market last year are reported to have died. Here now is the news in detail. President Edgar Lungu has called on the church to pray for continued peace and unity in the country. President Lungu also appealed to the church to pray for politicians and encourage them to be guided by the teachings of Christ in their quest to aspire for leadership positions. He says there is need for the church to play an active role in helping to address the political violence among politicians. President Lungu states that he will continue being a strong believer of Christian values and that he will not be distracted by other politicians who do not believe in God. Zanos reports that the president said this at St. Joseph's Parish in Mangango when he attended Mass, and Parish Coordinator Chikwekwe Nyundu commended government for the various infrastructure development in the area. Mr. Nyundu has also wished President Lungu peace and unity as he continues to govern the people of Zambia. Meanwhile, St. Joseph's priest John Nkonkaisha, who preached the gospel from the book of Mark chapter 13, verse 24 to 32, encouraged people to always stay focused. About 15 out of the marketeers who lost merchandise and other properties in the fire that swept through the Lusaka City Market in July last year are reported to have died. One of the surviving affected marketeer, Doreen Kabindawina, has disclosed that majority of those that have died over a period of 1 year had been suffering from either stroke or high blood pressure. Mrs. Kabindawina, who has resumed her business at the city market, tells Q News that this is an indication of the misery marketeers whose business was affected by the fire have been going through. We have more in this report.
It has been over a year since the Lusaka City Market was brought to ruin by fire. Besides destroying property worth millions of kwacha, the fire has shattered hundreds of people's lives. It is estimated that over 15 marketeers have also died out of either shock or stroke from the grief the loss of their property through the inferno left them. Doreen Kabindawina is however one of the few marketeers that was picked up from where the fire left and now narrates her untold misery she had to go through.
It's not easy. I'm being supported by my son. My son is the one who is giving me. I can't even afford. I can't afford. I'm more or less like I'm being fed by my son. My son is the one running the house. Whatever very little money I get here, there's nothing I can be proud of to say. Whatever little I'm getting here, actually I'm still investing slowly. It's a long term.
Mrs. Kabindawina, who is a retiree in her early 60s, had been trading in this market for several years before the inferno. It is not easy now for her to deal with the challenge she has to face in resuscitating her business, and she is not optimistic. Things may change anytime soon.
So listen, there are so many challenges we have, especially the rains are just around the corner. We don't know where to get money again to start buying things. If the government is thinking of putting
The loss of her property in the fire has, on the other hand, changed her business mindset. She has learned that in business, you do not take anything for granted. All assets must be insured.
There was supposed to be, some of these insurance companies, some of them keep becoming to the market. No matter how small things we have, they should be putting giving us some lectures and say, when you insure a property, the advantage of insuring a property is this. We don't have such insurance company. But now, like the way it is, after some time when I'm maybe I'll rise up do some other things, because I remember, okay, I've insured my house.
Mrs. Kabindawina's fate and business after the inferno is clearly an ideal case study that demonstrates what the impact of the fire that swept through the Lusaka City Market has been on the affected marketeers. She symbolizes a spirit of resilience to survive and move on after tragedy. Lazarus Sichula, it has
The ruling PF has dismissed as misplaced and mischievous the suggestion that an early general election be called in view of the lost confidence of the Zambian people in its capacity to govern. PF Media Director Sunday Chanda says his party also finds the suggestion to be an outrageous and ridiculous wild call, as it has no founding in the country's electoral law. Mr. Chanda says it is equally funny that such a suggestion of an early election is being parroted by small political parties that have never contested any election in their lifetime. He has told Q News that the ruling PF can, however, easily win any general election that is called midway of its 5 years mandate. Mr. Chanda states that the victories that the ruling party has been recording in by-elections that have been held since the 2016 general elections are litmus test enough of how strong the PF still is. He says his party therefore prides itself that it still enjoys the confidence of the people and the trust they have bestowed in the leadership of President Edgar Lungu. Mr. Chanda says this is why the ruling PF will not give credence to petty talk and childish issues being raised by some opposition political parties. He says his party is only ready for constructive noise from the opposition, especially given the point at which it has reached in bringing about development in the country.
We are at a point in the life of this nation where the Patriotic Front has been very, very clear with regard to development. If you look at what we've done over the last 7 years, there is no party that comes close. We salute the founding father of this country and UNIP for what they did. But in terms of the infrastructure profile that the Patriotic Front has rolled out over the period of 7 years, no one comes close, not even the former ruling party Movement for Multi-Party Democracy. And we pride ourselves in the fact that we continue to enjoy the confidence of the people of Zambia, and the confidence and the trust that they've in the leadership of His Excellency President Edgar Lungu. So from our side, you know, we are very humbled by the confidence, continued and renewed confidence from the Zambian people, that even when some political parties have continued to preach against this country and they've continued to paint Zambia negatively in the international space, this country has continued to attract foreign direct investment. You know very well that just this month, Zambia was voted, our strategy for investment was voted to be the best in France, and the award was received on behalf of this country by Her Excellency Dr. Christine Kaseba in France. And President Lungu, during the United Nations General Assembly, was again awarded with the award of being a champion for industrialization on the continent by UNIDO. All these are success stories.
The Movement for National Transformation, MNT, says it believes that legitimacy and credibility is very critical for the governance of any country. MNT President Daniel Shimunza says his party also thinks that if citizens begin to feel differentiated by party in power, those that are in government should also begin to revisit their mandate. Mr. Shimunza says to this effect, history confirms that first Republican President Kenneth Kaunda called for an early election in 1991 when he realized he had lost the confidence of the people. He has told Q News that this entails that if the majority of Zambians feel that the government is not doing the right thing in governing the country, it becomes important for the government to start listening. Mr. Shimunza states that the MNT is of the view that the cry of the Zambian people must not fall on deaf ears of those governing the country. He says this is why his party does not, in this case, also feel it should not comment on such issues, despite the fact that it has not contested in any election in the country.
And so when you have political parties that are so-called big political parties defending the wrongs of government, particularly the PF, if they are defending the wrongs of government, that is the reason why the Zambian people will vote against them in 2021. And so it's not a question of participating in election. You know, it doesn't mean that if you have not participated in any election, you cannot comment to give checks and balances as a political party. We have a program that we are working on ourselves, And at the right time, we're going to begin to participate in the election. We are not trying. We want to win elections once we participate. And so we have a program that we are following. And so it's not an argument. It's a very shallow argument to say political parties that have never participated in elections must not comment on maybe the wrongs or misdeeds of government. And so we find it very strange that our colleagues want to use that as a lame argument to the policy implementation that most of the Zambian people are questioning how state-owned enterprises are being listed, or if you want, in inverted commas, sold. And so the people need answers. And those who are in power, they should not defend their wrongs. They should answer. And this is what we are calling the PF-led government, that they must begin to have wider consensus and begin to implement policies that are coherent and comprehensive.
And Mr. Shimunza says his party does not further think the summoning and subsequent possible arresting of UPND leader Hakainde Hichilema is in national interest. He says what the MNT would like to see is a more civilized and amicable way of dealing with national issues. The Opposition People's Alliance for Change, PAC, says it is worried about how people view certain institutions such as the judiciary in the country. PSC President Endiford Banda has told the Q News that the reaction of the members of the public over the recent rulings by the Constitutional Court indicates that they have lost confidence in the judiciary. Mr. Banda states that this shows that the general public is losing self-assurance in the judiciary. He says the image of the judiciary therefore needs to be worked on by the people's responsible, because Zambians do not want to get to a point where people stop believing in the judiciary.
But our worry is that, if we get to a point in a country where people should say, we knew it was going to go this way, we knew it was going to go this way, I think we should be worried about, how people view certain institutions, especially an institution like the judiciary. This kind of reaction from the general public indicates that the general public have lost confidence in the judiciary. They do not expect any cases that are against the government to be looked at independently. And if the government sues someone, I think the general public would definitely expect the government to win, which actually demonstrates that there is a lack of independence in the judiciary. And there is a lot of work that needs to be done to actually ensure that the judiciary is independent. I think the image of the judiciary needs to be worked on by the people responsible, from the Chief Justice, and also even the government itself, from the Ministry of Justice and the President himself, because we don't want to get to a point where people stop believing that the judiciary can actually look at cases fairly and pass judgments without any biasness or interference from the executive. But
the United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, has pledged to provide $500,000 in terms of technical assistance, equipment and financial resources towards the conducting of Zambia's 2020 national census. The United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund, UNICEF, has also pledged to provide $100,000 towards the exercise. The pledges were made when the Minister of National Development Planning, Alexander Chiteme, on behalf of the Vice President Inongawina, met cooperating partners and the private sector to mobilize resources for the 2020 census on population and housing. United Nations Resident Coordinator Janet Rogan announced UNFPA and UNICEF pledges towards the 2020 census. Ms. Rogan announced that UNAIDS has pledged to support with the technical assistance from UN agencies, which is being provided in line ministries to increase data quality. And the International Organization for Migration, IOM, Chief of Mission Annie Lane was keen to learn the incorporation and recognition of migration issues in the 2020 census. Ms. Lane notes the need for quality data on migration characteristics and variables in the context of how to better manage and govern the internal and cross-border migration, ensuring that there is no one left behind. She states that IOM will offer technical assistance in pre-census activities, pilot post-enumeration, the main census activities, and post-enumeration census. Meanwhile, USAID thanked the Ministry of National Development, Planning, MNDP, and its department, the Central Statistical Office, CSO, for the presentations. The USAID already contributes some resources through technical assistance being provided by the U.S. Census Bureau to the CSO Zambia, and will conduct the census of population and housing in August 2020. The 2020 census will be the first of its kind in Zambia to be conducted using electronic data collection methodology, computer-assisted personal interviewing CAPI, and this is contained in a statement made available to Zanis in Lusaka today by Ministry of National Development Planning spokesperson Chibaula Silwamba. Government has announced plans to legalize the recycling of the mine slag at the old Kabwe mine. Central Province Minister Sidney Mushanga says government is concerned about the illegal mining activities by scavengers that is taking place at the mining dump. Mr. Mushanga says government's concern is not particularly that such mining activities could be a death trap for the scavengers, but also the scavengers are at a high risk of lead poisoning. He has told AQ News that to this effect, the process of engaging the scavengers through the provincial administration has already started. Mr. Mushanga says the idea is to see how much scavengers can be made part of the World Bank financed-led remediation project. He says government wants to ensure that scavengers go through some formal training before they could be allowed to continue with the mining activities at the old mine slag.
So the young people are being engaged by the government, and we want, if they are to involve themselves in mining activities, at least some form of training, some form of skills, using the same project, led remediation project. Some form of skills will be given to some of the young people who will be involved. In fact, we are encouraging, as provincial administration, we are encouraging young people to form cooperatives, so that these are legal entities. If they are to go into mining activities, once they form these cooperatives, working hand in hand with the Ministry of Mines, they will be equipped with some skills. Skills which they will be using in the day-to-day activities of engaging themselves in these mining activities, maybe a small-scale mining activities. So that's what we are doing as a government. The resources were already made available by the World Bank. So the young people...
Personal interest of key political players has been cited as one of the main reasons the national dialogue process has failed to take off in the country. Political historian Bizek Piri has, however, acknowledged that dialogue among warring parties does sometimes take long to finally take off. Professor Piri, who is a university lecturer, nonetheless says it is good that there is still talk about starting the dialogue process. He says that there is therefore need to treat the issue of national dialogue with the seriousness it deserves. And Professor Piri has commended the caliber of the eminent persons whom the Zambian Center for Inter-Party Dialogue, ZCID, has flouted as those that will lead its dialogue process. Professor Piri says the four eminent persons come with them with a lot of experience. He has nonetheless warned that the dialogue process will not go anywhere should the debate on who should lead the process continue.
Well, I think dialogue is something that I think we have been waiting for, because when you have two parties, three parties, and they are not agreeing, dialogue is the only thing that is going to bring a solution and a way forward. Now we know that in our country, particularly since 2016, after the elections, there have been a lot of disagreements over certain issues, and the only way to resolve those is to sit down around the table and talk about them. The challenge that, from my point of view, that I've observed over time is that there doesn't seem to be an agreement of who should actually champion that. One day you hear the church should champion that, another day civil society organizations should champion that, and then we had the appointment of eminent persons. Now, when you look at those people that were appointed and whose names were mentioned, these are people who are very credible in as far as Zambia is concerned.
Governance, Elections, Advocacy and Research Gears Initiative Executive Director McDonough Chipenzi has reiterated the need to strengthen government investigating wings such as the Anti-Corruption Commission ACC and the Drug Enforcement Commission DEC. Mr. Chipenzi observes that Zambia's corruption fight will remain in vain if the autonomy of these institutions is not strengthened. He has attributed the continued failure by the investigating wings to be effective in the execution of their mandate to the manner in which leaders of the institutions are appointed. Mr. Chipenzi has told QTV News that because the said heads of these institutions are identified by government before Parliament approves their appointment, they are easily intimidated and fail to treat corruption cases involving government leaders with their merit the cases deserve. The GEAR's executive director's comments comes in the wake of corruption allegations against some non-government leaders which have gone uninvestigated.
Because of the appointment modalities that we are practicing here, the Anti-Corruption Director General is identified by the President, and you have a parliament which is skewed, and this is why in America, the American says, no, we love you, Trump, but we will not give you a blank check. So the House of Representatives will have more opposition than the ruling party. But at Senate level, we leave you to continue enjoying that thing. Even here, if we can have parliament that is more opposition than the ruling party, we will have, some of these names plotted as, constitutional office holders, like Anti-Corruption Director, DEC Director, Electoral Commission of Zambia, commissioners, and many other people who are supposed to be approved by Parliament. It will be done in a manner that not just a name will be brought, but a name of integrity, a name that has got a proven experience that they can do the job. Because
a Lusaka-based politician, Chris Chinda, has urged youths in the country to be responsible and avoid alcohol abuse this festive season. Mr. Chinda says many youths tend to misbehave this period as they celebrate Christmas and New Year, which sometimes result in serious consequences. He has cautioned youths to avoid driving under the influence of alcohol, as this may result in accidents. And Mr. Chinda has also appealed to the grade 12s who are writing their exams to stay focused and not celebrate their final paper by engaging in drug abuse, as this is not the end of the world.
I would like to urge the youths as we approach the festive season to act responsibly, not to drink excessively. To those youths that are completing school, this is not the end of the world. You still have a long way to go, because you still need to prepare for college. To the police and the council police, I would like to urge them to intensify the patrols so that we don't have the underage patronage in the bars.
The Buses and Taxi Drivers Association of Zambia, BTDAZ, says it has made headways in the planned collection of social security contributions on behalf of the National Pension Scheme Authority, NAPSA. BTDAZ National Secretary Sydney Mbewe has disclosed that the association has since obtained an approved contract of employment from the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, which will support the association in implementing the details of the signed MOU. Mr. Mbewe says once implemented, the development would respond to challenges both drivers and their employers have encountered in the past.
The signing of the NAPSA Memorandum of Understanding needed other things to support it. And what we have done as an association is to obtain an approved contract of employment from the Ministry of Labour and Social Security that will support the implementation of registration of members to the Social Security. Now, the coming on board of the contract of employment in itself has got compliances within it. One of them being the NAPSA compliance, which any member will need to show evidence that their employer is paying for their NAPSA. And any employer also need to get a compliance clearance certificate for their members.
On the 12th of August this year, NAPSA signed a Memorandum of Understanding MOU with 7 informal sector associations, where the associations, which included BTDAZ, which will adequately capture the different types of informal sector. Employees for Social Security Inclusion. As we end the news, here's a recapitulation of stories in the headlines. President Edgar Lungu has called on the church to pray for continued peace and unity in the country. About 15 out of the marketeers who lost merchandise in the fire that swept through Lusaka City Market last year are reported to have died. That's that item wraps up the news at this hour. Thank you so much for being with us throughout. Bye-bye, God bless, and continue watching QTV Experience Home.